Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places. Tonight's story is about Marcus Thompson, a night security guard who worked the graveyard shift at one of Manhattan's most prestigious auction houses. For 7 years, he walked those marble halls in silence, invisible to the millionaires and collectors who frequented the building. But one evening, when a powerful CEO made what he thought was an impossible challenge, Marcus would reveal a secret that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The grandfather clock in the main gallery of Whitmore Associates Auction House chimed 11 times, its deep bronze tones echoing through the empty corridors. Marcus Thompson adjusted his security uniform and began his nightly rounds, his footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs that adorned the floors of Manhattan's most exclusive auction house. At 52, Marcus had perfected the art of being invisible. 7 years of night security work had taught him to move like a ghost through the building, checking locks, monitoring alarms, and ensuring the safety of artifacts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The clients who visited during the day never noticed him. He was just another fixture in their wealthy world, as unremarkable as the security cameras mounted in the corners. Tonight was different, though. The auction house was hosting an exclusive private viewing for their most elite clients, and the event was running well past normal hours. Through the tall windows of the main gallery, Marcus could see the city lights twinkling like scattered diamonds against the Manhattan skyline. Inside, the cream of New York society mingled among priceless antiquities, their champagne glasses catching the warm glow of the crystal chandeliers. Marcus made his way to the upper level, where his small security office overlooked the main floor. From this vantage point, he could monitor the entire building while staying out of sight. He settled into his worn leather chair, a donated piece that had seen better days, and opened his thermos of coffee. The rich aroma filled the small space as he watched the elegant figures below through the one-way glass. The centerpiece of tonight's viewing was extraordinary, a collection of ancient Mesopotamian tablets recently acquired from a private estate in Switzerland. The artifacts dated back over 4,000 years, covered in cuneiform script that told stories of forgotten civilizations. They were displayed in climate-controlled cases, each one worth more than Marcus would earn in a lifetime. At the center of the gathering stood Jonathan Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries, one of the world's largest technology conglomerates. At 45, Blackwood was everything Marcus wasn't: tall, commanding, draped in a tailored Italian suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly salary. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his confident demeanor commanded attention wherever he went. He had built his empire through aggressive acquisitions and ruthless business tactics, earning both respect and fear in equal measure. Blackwood was holding court near the Mesopotamian display, regaling a small group of wealthy collectors with stories of his latest business conquests. His voice carried easily through the gallery, amplified by the high ceilings and marble surfaces. "The beauty of these ancient texts," Blackwood was saying, gesturing toward the tablets with his champagne flute, "is that they represent humanity's first attempts at organized communication. Of course, they're completely indecipherable to modern eyes. Even our best scholars can only guess at their true meaning." Dr. Patricia Williams, the auction house's chief antiquities expert, politely cleared her throat. "Actually, Mr. Blackwood, cuneiform has been extensively studied. We have quite detailed translations of many." Blackwood waved her off with a dismissive laugh. "Academic theories, perhaps. But the reality is that these symbols are essentially meaningless to anyone living today. They're valuable as artifacts, certainly, but as actual communication? Impossible to truly understand." From his position above, Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He had heard this type of arrogant dismissal before. Wealthy people assuming that their money automatically made them experts on subjects they knew nothing about. He forced himself to stay seated, reminding himself that it wasn't his place to correct billionaire CEOs. The conversation below continued, with Blackwood becoming increasingly animated as he expanded on his theories about ancient languages. "You see," he said to the growing crowd around him, "these so-called translations are just educated guesses. No one alive today could actually read these tablets and tell you what they really say. It's all academic speculation dressed up as fact. Several guests nodded appreciatively, either genuinely impressed by Blackwood's confidence or simply unwilling to contradict someone worth $12 billion. The auction house staff maintained their professional smiles, though Marcus could see the tension in Dr. Williams's posture. In fact, Blackwood continued, his voice growing louder and more theatrical, I'd be willing to bet that no one in this room, hell, no one in this entire building, could actually translate even a single line of authentic cuneiform script. It's a lost art, if you can even call it an art. The challenge hung in the air like an expensive perfume, heavy and unmistakable. Several guests exchanged glances, and Dr. Williams opened her mouth as if to respond. But Blackwood wasn't finished. Tell you what, he said, his eyes gleaming with the predatory satisfaction of a man who enjoyed proving his superiority. I'll make this interesting. Anyone here who can provide an accurate, detailed translation of that tablet there, he pointed to the largest piece in the collection, can have my annual consulting fee. That's $2.5 million. The gallery fell silent except for the soft classical music playing in the background. Even the catering staff seemed to freeze in place, silver trays balanced in their hands as they processed what they had just heard. Blackwood looked around the room with obvious satisfaction, his smile widening as the silence stretched on. As I thought, all this academic pretension, but when it comes to actual knowledge, to real understanding, he shrugged elegantly, letting the gesture complete his sentence. Dr. Williams stepped forward, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment and indignation. Mr. Blackwood, I can assure you that cuneiform translation is a well-established field of study. Perhaps if you'd allow me to… Dr. Williams, Blackwood interrupted smoothly, I'm sure you're very accomplished in your field. But there's a difference between reading about something in textbooks and actually being able to do it. Academic theory versus practical application. His tone was patronizing, the verbal equivalent of patting her on the head. The insult was subtle but unmistakable, and Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. He had watched this scene play out in different forms countless times over his 7 years here. Wealthy people using their money as a license to belittle and dismiss anyone they considered beneath them. Staff members who couldn't fight back because they needed their jobs. Experts whose knowledge was trivialized by people who confused wealth with wisdom. But this was different. This wasn't just about disrespecting the staff. Blackwood was dismissing an entire field of human knowledge, thousands of years of civilization, as worthless. He was treating the written legacy of ancient peoples as nothing more than expensive decorations. Marcus stood up slowly from his chair, his coffee growing cold as he watched the scene unfold below. The tablet Blackwood had pointed to was clearly visible from his position, its carefully carved symbols arranged in neat rows across the clay surface. Even from this distance, Marcus could make out the distinctive wedge-shaped marks that characterized cuneiform script. His heart began to beat faster as memories surfaced, memories he had buried deep for 7 years, from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. A life where he had been Dr. Marcus Thompson, not just Marcus the security guard. A life where ancient languages weren't mysterious curiosities, but living, breathing forms of human expression that he could read as easily as a newspaper. Below, Blackwood was reveling in his moment of triumph, completely unaware that 2 floors above him someone was reading the ancient text he had declared impossible to understand. Someone who knew that the tablet contained not just words but a story, a human story of love, loss, and hope that had survived 4 millennia, waiting for someone who could give it voice again. Marcus took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus descended the marble staircase with measured steps, his hand trailing along the polished brass banister. Each footfall echoed softly in the grand space, a sound that would normally go unnoticed. But tonight, as conversations continued around the Mesopotamian display, a few heads began to turn toward the approaching figure in the Navy security uniform. He had made this walk thousands of times over 7 years, but never with this purpose. Never with his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The weight of his decision pressed down on him with each step. He was about to shatter the carefully constructed walls he had built around his former life. Jonathan Blackwood was still holding court, his voice carrying easily across the gallery as he expanded on his theories about the limitations of academic scholarship. The problem with universities, he was saying to his captivated audience, is that they exist in ivory towers, completely disconnected from practical reality. These professors spend decades studying dead languages that have no relevance to the modern world. Dr. Williams stood slightly apart from the group now, her earlier attempt at correction having been so thoroughly dismissed that she seemed to have retreated into professional silence. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and Marcus could see the frustration in her rigid posture. The other guests, a mixture of private collectors, museum board members, and art dealers, listened to Blackwood with the kind of rapt attention that extreme wealth commanded. Among them was Victoria Sterling, heiress to a shipping fortune and known for her collection of ancient artifacts. Beside her stood Dr. Robert Chen, a retired archaeology professor who had clearly chosen discretion over confrontation. The group also included several younger tech entrepreneurs who hung on Blackwood's every word, hoping some of his success might rub off on them through proximity. Ancient civilizations were primitive, Blackwood continued, warming to his theme. Their writing systems were crude attempts at communication, nothing like the sophisticated languages we use today. Even if we could theoretically translate them, what would be the point? What could people from 4,000 years ago possibly tell us that would be relevant to modern life? Marcus reached the main floor and began walking toward the group. His approach was steady but unhurried, the gait of a security guard making his rounds. Several people noticed him but quickly looked away. In their world, service staff were meant to be invisible unless specifically needed. "Take that tablet there," Blackwood said, pointing again at the largest piece in the collection. "Probably just a grocery list or some primitive accounting. The idea that it contains profound wisdom or meaningful literature is pure romantic fantasy." That was when Marcus spoke, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of conversation and clinking glasses with quiet authority. "Actually, it's a letter." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment before registering. Blackwood turned toward the source of the interruption, his expression shifting from surprise to mild annoyance as his eyes landed on the security guard standing at the edge of their circle. "I'm sorry." Blackwood's tone carried the kind of polite dismissal reserved for staff who had overstepped their bounds. Marcus took a step closer, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture that was both respectful and confident. "The tablet you've been discussing, it's a personal letter, not an accounting record. Written by a merchant named Ian Nasser to his business partner in Babylon." The silence that followed was profound. Victoria Sterling's champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. Even the catering staff seemed to have frozen in place, sensing that something significant was happening. Blackwood recovered first, his expression hardening into the kind of cold smile that had intimidated countless business rivals over the years. "I see. And you are?" "Marcus Thompson, sir, building security." "Well, Mr. Thompson," Blackwood's voice dripped with condescension, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I think we'll leave the archaeological speculation to the professionals." "With respect, sir," Marcus replied, his tone remaining level, "it's not speculation." The opening line translates roughly to my brother in business, may the gods grant you long life and prosperity in all your endeavors." It's written in the Old Babylonian dialect, circa 1800 BCE. Dr. Williams's head snapped up, her eyes widening as she stared at Marcus. The specificity of his translation, the casual reference to dialectical variations. These weren't the words of someone making educated guesses. Blackwood's smile became predatory. He sensed an opportunity to reassert his dominance in front of his audience, to put this presumptuous security guard back in his place with maximum public humiliation. "Mr. Thompson, I admire your confidence, truly. But surely you understand the difference between reading something on Wikipedia and actual scholarly expertise?" "I do understand that difference, yes, sir." "Good." Blackwood turned back to his audience, clearly expecting the conversation to end there. "As I was saying about the limitations of academic theory versus practical application. The letter goes on to describe problems with the copper shipment, Marcus continued, his voice carrying just enough volume to reach everyone in the group. The merchant is complaining that the quality was inferior to what was promised, and he's requesting either replacement goods or a partial refund. He mentions his wife is pregnant with their third child, and that business has been difficult due to conflicts along the trade routes. This time, the silence stretched longer. Dr. Williams had gone completely still, her professional instincts recognizing something extraordinary happening before her eyes. The level of detail Marcus was providing, the casual way he referenced historical context and grammatical structures, it suggested knowledge far beyond what any casual observer could possess. Blackwood turned back to Marcus, his expression no longer amused. "That's quite a story, Mr. Thompson. Very creative. But I think we both know you're making this up as you go along." The final paragraph mentions a festival in honor of Marduk that was postponed due to flooding, Marcus said quietly. He apologizes for the delay in payment and promises to honor his debts after the next caravan arrives from Ur. He signs it with his personal seal, a stylized bull, which you can see pressed into the clay at the bottom right corner of the tablet. Dr. Williams moved closer to the display case, her trained eye searching the ancient surface. There, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, was indeed the faint impression of a bull seal pressed into the clay before it had been fired 4 millennia ago. "My God," she whispered. "He's right. The seal is there." The revelation hit the group like a physical force. Conversations at other displays around the gallery began to quiet as people sensed something dramatic unfolding. Even Blackwood seemed momentarily stunned, his usual quick wit abandoning him as he processed what had just happened. Marcus stood quietly, waiting. He had crossed the line now. There was no going back to invisibility. No returning to the simple life of a night security guard who asked no questions and attracted no attention. The secret he had guarded for 7 years was beginning to emerge, and with it, all the complications he had spent so long trying to avoid. Victoria Sterling was the first to break the spell. "How on earth did you know about the seal?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine curiosity rather than skepticism. "The same way I knew about the letter," Marcus replied simply. "I can read it." Blackwood's face had begun to flush red, the color creeping up from his collar, as the full implications of the situation became clear. He had been challenged by a security guard, and worse, the security guard appeared to be winning. In front of an audience of New York's cultural elite, his expertise was being called into question by someone he had automatically dismissed as irrelevant. "This is absurd," Blackwood said, his voice rising slightly. "You're telling me that a night watchman can read ancient Mesopotamian?" "Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm telling you." The simple directness of Marcus's response seemed to hit Blackwood like a slap. Around them, the gallery had gone almost completely quiet as word spread that something extraordinary was happening near the ancient tablet display. Dr. Chen stepped forward, his scholarly instincts overriding social protocol. "Mr. Thompson, could you tell us about your background? This level of knowledge suggests considerable formal training." Marcus met the older man's eyes, seeing in them the recognition of one academic looking at another. The moment of truth had arrived, and, with it, the end of Marcus Thompson, the invisible security guard. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 7 years of carefully maintained silence about to lift from his shoulders. The faces surrounding him showed a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and in Blackwood's case, barely contained fury at having his authority challenged so publicly. "Before I came to work here," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal, "I was Dr. Marcus Thompson, professor of ancient Near Eastern studies at Columbia University. I specialized in Mesopotamian languages and cultures, with particular focus on cuneiform script and Old Babylonian commercial correspondence." The words hung in the air like a revelation that reshuffled everyone's understanding of reality. Dr. Williams's mouth fell slightly open. Victoria Sterling set down her champagne glass with a soft clink that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. "That's impossible," Blackwood sputtered, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "You're a security guard, you work nights. You." "I lost my position 7 years ago," Marcus continued, his tone remaining calm and professional. "Budget cuts eliminated my department." At 55, with a specialized skill set in what administrators called a dead field, I found myself unemployable in academia. The security job was supposed to be temporary, just until I could figure out my next move. Dr. Chen stepped closer, his scholarly instincts fully engaged. Professor Thompson. Marcus Thompson. Wait, you authored the definitive translation of the Hammurabi Correspondence, didn't you? The 2016 publication that revolutionized our understanding of Babylonian commercial law? Marcus nodded quietly. Among other work, yes. My God, Dr. Chen breathed. I used your translations in my own research. Your work on Old Babylonian syntax was groundbreaking, but you just disappeared from the academic world. We all wondered what happened to you. Life happened, Marcus replied simply. When you're over 50 and suddenly unemployed, pride becomes a luxury you can't afford. I needed steady income, health insurance. The security position provided both. Blackwood's face had progressed from red to purple. The realization that he had been thoroughly outmaneuvered by someone he had dismissed as irrelevant was clearly causing him physical distress. This is ridiculous. Even if what you're saying is true, my original point stands. These ancient texts have no practical value in the modern world. Marcus turned to face him directly, and for the first time his demeanor shifted from deferential to professorial. Mr. Blackwood, with respect, you couldn't be more wrong. That letter I just translated, it deals with quality control in international commerce, dispute resolution between trading partners, and the impact of political instability on supply chains. Sound familiar? The parallel hit home immediately. Several people in the crowd exchanged glances, recognizing the universal nature of business challenges across millennia. Furthermore, Marcus continued, his confidence growing as he stepped fully back into his expertise, the legal frameworks developed in ancient Mesopotamia form the foundation of modern contract law. The Code of Hammurabi established principles of liability, property rights, and commercial regulation that still influence legal systems today. To dismiss these texts as irrelevant is to ignore the very foundation of Western civilization. Dr. Williams found her voice again. Professor Thompson, would you be willing to provide a complete translation of the tablet for our archives? Of course, Marcus replied, though I should mention that your current attribution is slightly incorrect. This isn't from a private Swiss collection originally. Based on the clay composition and scribal hand, this piece was almost certainly part of the Kanesh merchant archives discovered in Turkey in the 1950s. It likely entered the private market through questionable channels decades ago. The implications of this statement sent a visible ripple through the crowd. Authentication and provenance were critical issues in the antiquities market, worth millions in valuation differences. Blackwood, sensing his position becoming increasingly untenable, made one final attempt to reassert control. Well, this has been educational. But I believe we've spent enough time on this academic exercise. The point remains that... The point, Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades commanding university lecture halls, is that you made a challenge. You offered $2.5 million to anyone who could provide an accurate, detailed translation of that tablet. I've done exactly that, with verification from Dr. Williams regarding physical evidence you claimed didn't exist. The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in the gallery seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see how this extraordinary confrontation would resolve. Blackwood's jaw worked silently for several moments before he managed to speak. You can't be serious, you're a security guard. I'm a scholar who happens to work security, Marcus corrected, and a challenge is a challenge, regardless of who accepts it. Victoria Sterling stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. Jonathan, the man clearly knows what he's talking about. Dr. Chen has verified his credentials, Dr. Williams has confirmed his translation details, and frankly, you've been thoroughly outclassed. This is preposterous, Blackwood snapped. I'm not paying $2.5 million to a night watchman based on some lucky guesses. Lucky guesses? Dr. Chen's voice carried decades of academic authority. Mr. Blackwood, I've spent 40 years studying ancient languages. What Professor Thompson just demonstrated represents the highest level of scholarly expertise. the dialectical analysis, the historical context, the recognition of scribal hands. This isn't luck. This is mastery. Marcus stood quietly, allowing the academic community to defend the validity of his field. This was bigger than just him now. It was about respect for knowledge, for expertise that couldn't be bought or dismissed with money. Dr. Williams spoke up again. "If I may, Mr. Blackwood, Whitmore Associates would be honored to facilitate this transaction. Professor Thompson has not only met your challenge but exceeded it. His insights about provenance alone could save us significant legal complications down the road." The crowd was now firmly on Marcus's side. What had begun as Blackwood's moment of triumph had become a public humiliation. The tech mogul looked around the room, seeing only faces that had lost their earlier deference. "Fine," Blackwood said finally, his voice tight with suppressed rage, "but I want a complete written translation, with full academic citations and provenance analysis. If you're really a professor, then prove it with professional quality work." Marcus nodded. "I'll have it ready by tomorrow morning. Same deadline you originally proposed." Blackwood stormed away without another word, brushing past several guests in his haste to leave. The spell broken, conversations resumed throughout the gallery, though Marcus remained the center of attention. Dr. Chen approached him with obvious excitement. "Professor, I have to ask, what are your plans? Have you considered returning to academia? With your expertise, surely universities would be interested in." Marcus shook his head. "I appreciate the thought, Dr. Chen, but that ship has sailed. 7 years is a lifetime, in academic terms. My research is outdated, my contacts have moved on. Besides," he looked around the gallery with new eyes, "I found a different kind of satisfaction in protecting these artifacts, in being their guardian rather than just their interpreter." Dr. Williams stepped closer. "Professor Thompson, could I speak with you privately? I have a proposition that might interest you." 3 hours later, after the last guests had departed and the gallery had returned to its nighttime quiet, Marcus sat in Dr. Williams's office reviewing a formal job offer. The position was for senior consultant in ancient Near Eastern acquisitions, with a salary that dwarfed his security wages and benefits that included full access to the auction house's research facilities. "We've needed someone with your expertise for years," Dr. Williams explained. "Authentication issues, provenance questions, catalog descriptions. There's so much work that requires genuine scholarly knowledge. The security background is actually a bonus. You understand how to protect these pieces as well as study them." Marcus looked at the contract, then at the woman across from him. "And the night security position?" "Would be eliminated, obviously, though you'd have access to the building at all hours for research purposes." The irony wasn't lost on him. 7 years ago, he had lost his academic position and been forced into security work. Now, his security work was opening the door back to scholarship, albeit in a different form. "There's one condition," Marcus said finally. "When Blackwood's check clears, assuming he actually honors the bet, I want to establish a scholarship fund for mature students returning to academia. People who've been forced out by circumstances beyond their control." Dr. Williams smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same gallery where his transformation had begun, but now he wore a tailored suit instead of a security uniform. He was leading a private tour for potential donors to the scholarship fund he had established, the Thompson Second Chances Foundation. "This tablet," he told the small group gathered around the Mesopotamian display, "teaches us that some things remain constant across millennia. Human ambition, the challenges of commerce, the importance of keeping one's word. But it also reminds us that knowledge has a way of surfacing when we least expect it, often from the most unlikely sources." A young man in the group raised his hand. "Professor Thompson, is it true that you were working as a security guard when you first translated this piece?" Marcus smiled, remembering another night when he had stood in this same spot, invisible and overlooked. "I was. And in many ways, that experience taught me more about the real value of these artifacts than all my years in academia. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters." As the group moved on to the next display, Marcus lingered for a moment beside the ancient tablet. The merchant's letter, with its timeless concerns about quality, payment, and family, had changed his life in ways the ancient scribe could never have imagined. The security guard's secret had become the scholar's second chance. And in a building full of priceless artifacts, that transformation had proven to be the most valuable discovery of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.